Imagine a secret hidden right in the heart of the White House. A system that was always listening, recording every conversation, every deal, every secret. Well, that system was real, and it held a secret so big it would end a presidency and rewrite American history.
So let's get right into it. The question that absolutely consumed the country was what was actually on those tapes? What could possibly be so damaging that it could bring down the most powerful man on the planet? That's the mystery we're going to unravel today.
But to really get what happened, we have to rewind. Because before there was a scandal, there was just the system. Long before anyone had even heard the word Watergate, President Nixon had this secret, incredible tool to record his own history, or so he thought. And the scale of this thing was just mind-boggling. We're not talking about one little microphone here. Starting in February 1971, the Secret Service wired the place. Microphones were literally hidden inside his desks, inside lamps, taped under the cabinet room table. They even tapped the phones. It was this massive, invisible web, and it heard everything. And you want to know the cleverest part? The whole system was completely automatic. It was tied to this little device called the presidential locator. See, the Secret Service used it to keep tabs on where the president was for security, but secretly it was also rigged to automatically trigger the recorders the second Nixon walked into a room. It was seamless, constant, and nobody knew.
So you have this huge secret just humming along silently in the White House. What on earth could possibly blow the lid off something like that? Well, as it turns out, it wasn't some grand master plan. It was something the White House brushed off as just a third-rate burglary. And here it is, June 17, 1972. 5 guys get busted breaking into the headquarters of the opposition party. On the surface, it just looked like a clumsy, weird little crime. But that one incident, it was the single loose thread that investigators started pulling, and it would end up unraveling the entire presidency. Okay, so fast forward a year. The Watergate investigation is getting really intense. It's obvious there's a cover-up going on, but investigators have no idea that a complete audio record of that cover-up might actually exist. That is, until a pretty unlikely guy takes the stand. Enter Alexander Butterfield. Now, he wasn't a big shot, not a household name. He was an aide who managed the president's schedule, his paperwork. Basically, he was the guy who knew the nuts and bolts of Nixon's daily life better than almost anyone. So investigators bring him in for what was supposed to be a routine, private interview. They're just fishing, asking everyone if there was any way conversations could have been recorded. And then, just 3 days later, bam, he's called to testify publicly, on live TV, in front of the whole country. They knew he had something big. And this, right here, is the moment history turns on a dime. When they asked him about recordings in that private session, Butterfield just dropped the bombshell. He told them everything. And a few days later, he said it again for the whole world to hear. In one sentence, the secret was out, and the hunt for the tapes was on.
The second the world found out about the tapes, it sparked this unbelievable clash. You had Congress and the special prosecutor on one side demanding the tapes as criminal evidence. And on the other side, you had the President of the United States saying absolutely not. This thing blew up into a massive legal war that went all the way to the top. Nixon's team argued for executive privilege, the idea that a president's conversations have to be confidential for him to do his job. But the Supreme Court came back with a historic ruling. Sorry, but the need for evidence in a criminal investigation is more important. And just look at this number. The decision wasn't even close. It was a unanimous 8-0 ruling against the president. I mean, think about that. Even the justices that Nixon himself had appointed to the court ruled against him. There was nowhere left to run. He had to give up the tapes. But if you think handing over the tapes was the end of the story, you're wrong. In a lot of ways, it was just the beginning of a whole new set of questions, mysteries, and debates that are still going on today. And of course, the most famous mystery of all, the 18.5-minute gap. And get this, the missing conversation was from June 20th, 1972. That's just 3 days after the Watergate break-in. It was the one tape everyone wanted to hear, a conversation between Nixon and his chief of staff, and it was just gone. So what was the official story? While Nixon's secretary, Rosemary Woods, said she accidentally erased it while reaching for the phone, an honest mistake. But the forensic evidence told a very different story. Experts found that it wasn't one single erasure. It was 5 to 9 separate, clumsy, overlapping erasures. It looked a lot more like someone deliberately trying and failing to wipe the tape clean. The accident story just didn't add up.
For decades, the standard take on all this was that Watergate was a symptom of a much bigger problem, something historian Arthur Schlesinger Jr. called the imperial presidency. The idea is that over the years, the office of the president had just gotten way too powerful, gathering authority that the founding fathers never intended. And Nixon's actions, from the secret taping to the cover-up, were just the final, dangerous result of that trend.
But that's not the only view. More recently, a different story has emerged. Writers like Jeff Shepard, who was a lawyer in the Nixon White House, argue that the whole thing is way more complicated. They believe that Nixon was actually the one who was targeted, that he was brought down by a conspiracy of prosecutors, judges, and the media who were determined to overturn his massive election victory. But, no matter how you see the scandal, its lasting impact is undeniable. It's crazy to think about, but before Nixon, a president's papers were considered his personal property. He could just pack them up and take them home. The battle over these tapes led directly to the Presidential Records Act of 1978, which for the first time made it law that a president's official records belong to the public. That's a fundamental shift in government accountability. And so that leaves us with the big question that still hangs over all of this. Were the tapes the smoking gun that proved a crime was being run out of the Oval Office? Or were they the weapon a powerful establishment used to take out a president they couldn't beat at the ballot box? Even now, decades later, the answer really depends on who you ask.